It's confusing out there. I mean, it really is confusing out there. It's confusing to me. I've had this wild up and down ride of just trying to figure out what is going on out there in the world and what to make of it. So, but I don't just mean all of the external things. Like right now, there's a war going on that the US started, and there are some real cracks showing in the financial system that I've actually been tracking for months, but that are now really starting to show in a bigger way in our financial system, that's being stressed by the high oil prices that are due to, the oil delivery problems from the war, and just all of the other social problems and political problems, and just, I mean, there's stuff out there, right? But that's not actually the big thing I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is if you're like me and you follow people online who are intuitive, metaphysical, you could call it spiritual, in some way, a lot are saying that we are undergoing a process of change. And it's not just the intuitives now. There are past intuitives, such as Edgar Cayce, that's spelled Cacye, if I remember it right, hopefully. And there's Dolores Cannon. Both of those people in the past who were channelers of information in the past have predicted that this time will be quite a profound time of change. And then there are prophecies. There are prophecies like the Hopi Blue Star Kachina prophecy. And then there's the Pachacuti prophecy. So many different points of view, even the Mayan prophecy of 2000, of the big shift, or the end of the calendar and the start of a whole new era in 2012. All of those point to just around this time. I mean, plus or minus 12 years in the scope of history, or 13 or 14 years, whatever the math is on that one. Yes, I can still brain once in a while when I'm not AIing. Yeah, so it's crazy right now that there are so many people, past and present, prophecies past and present, saying we are undergoing a profound change. Not just a little teensy weensy change, not even like a mid-sized change like what has happened with past, sort of world wars or depressions or political revolutions, like that. This is next scale bigger than that. And so I have had a lot of ups and downs about this, because I'm like, sometimes I went away for a little bit of a trip this spring, and I actually got out of country, and it seemed like on the trip, so much was just sort of normal. Like, I mean, yeah, gas prices were up, although I was not in a gas car, so I wasn't as affected by that. But I mean, it's like, it seems kind of normal, except there's kind of a weird energy, a feeling of change. Like, a lot of people online have said this, and other symptoms of this energy too. For me, it's feeling, often at one point, feeling really good, feeling just clear and great. And then the next day I'm like, boom, crash, feeling just really down, processing through some past thing that's maybe come up due to some conversation or something that has happened recently. And this sort of cycle between them, and even some headaches and other things that might be called an illness normally, but that aren't an illness. And so it's wild, because I go into the comments of some of these videos talking about the changes, and the energetic effects, these are the terms that are commonly used. The energetic effects are for sensitive people. We pick up on them, and we have lots of these highs and lows and ups and downs, and actually feel the effects of the so-called energy. So I've been feeling all that, and also I myself receive through my own channel, my guidance, my intuition, downloads also saying that, yeah, we're going through some special stuff. But then on the flip side of that, there are two different problems with that. The sort of disbelief that I get into, and maybe you've experienced the same. The disbelief is that, okay, well, number one, again, you walk outside and right now things seem pretty normal. I mean, there are a bunch of things that are kind of off, but unless you're in the war zone or something, or looking at grocery prices, I mean that, or gas prices, everything else seems like, yeah, we're still humming along. Well, or jobs. I mean, there are definitely areas where you could look, if you focus in on it, you can see things are awry. But you just walk out into the neighborhood, people are out walking, and it's like kind of normal. So that's really hard to reconcile, this idea that we're undergoing massive change and yet things are kind of normal. And the thing that makes that even harder is that the timing on all of these predictions is, when people do give specific timing, they often seem like they're wrong or they disagree with one another. And that's exacerbated for me because when I, through my own guidance, which seems to give really good information at times, when it comes to like timing, I get very waffling answers like this. I mean, I get literally, this is not the prophecy channel. We're not here to prophesize for you. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So what is the problem with that? For me, again, it comes up with a lot of doubt. Like, okay, is this stuff just all made up? The conclusion that I come to is, and this comes from my scientific background, when you do a single experiment and get one data point that's kind of surprising, you're like, okay, throw it out or whatever. Two data points that are surprising, it's not really a trend yet. 3 data points, maybe you start seeing, okay, there could be a trend there. 5 data points, 10 data points, that could be a big trend. And I see all of those data points. Now, there's one risk to this for somebody who's really like hardcore skeptic. The risk even to this is of cross-contamination of ideas. So many of the people who are now getting downloads could have read some of these prophecies or some of these predictions. Although, what's interesting about that, which counteracts that skepticism, and then I'll stop with this whole round loop thing, but just some of the skeptics were trained to think through things rationally. So I just want to give you some food for thought. So when, I can get it that people would say, okay, well, so-and-so who's an intuitive or a psychic, did something based upon what Dolores Cannon said, as an example. So there's like crosstalk there. So it's not truly independent sources, they would potentially argue. Okay, that's fine. But then often when I bring up the Pachacuti prophecy, which you can look it up either in AI or with Google search, it's interesting, but it's like most people have not heard of that. I don't think Dolores Cannon nor Edgar Cayce had heard of that in their time, because that's been brought into our lexicon, our discussion by, what is her name? I'm blanking on the name of the Lynn Twist is the name of the person who brought that into the awareness here in the United States. So, and that really aligns with everything else that all of the other people are saying. So there are truly some independent, like outlier sources that are lining up. I mean, same with the Mayan calendar transition, 2012. That wasn't affected by anything. And I don't think what Dolores Cannon said or what intuitives are saying is all about like, oh, well, the Mayan calendar said 2012, so like we're just all going to prophecy this time. I mean, around about when 2012 happened, a lot of people were saying things about it. But, again, when you're talking about millennia, plus or minus 12 to 14 years is not a big deal. And even if there was a big shift in 2012, it takes a while for that to show up in society, right? So anyway, I don't believe the cynical argument that all of this is wrong. There are too many different things that line up. So I believe something big is happening. But then the problem is, what is it and what is the timing of it? And that still throws me for loops. So, but let me just outline a few things that I have come to understand from trying to piece together these different sources. Number one is, I believe it is a process of steps. A process of steps that is not like an all-at-once thing where all at once, suddenly everything changes like that. Then in fact, this process starts with energetic shifts. You could call them consciousness shifts. You could call them mood shifts if you want to. And that those shifts precede the physical manifestations, like people actually acting differently. And one of the starkest examples of the consciousness shift is if you look at Minnesota. In 2019, I believe, it was during the Black Lives Matter, the protests due to the beating of George Floyd. And then there were riots. There was a lot of violence. Now, there are all sorts of arguments back and forth how those got incited. But the fact is, there was a large amount of violence and fires there and in other places at that time due to that event. Okay, then you look 2026 and late 2025 at the violence that occurred in Minnesota. And, that was similar kind of, you could call it police violence of a sort. I don't want to blame it on actual police who are trained professionals because they probably would not have carried this out. But anyway, so this occurred. Negative things like people were actually, eliminated by this force. And there were protests, but were they violent? The answer is no. They have maintained a complete nonviolent posture as far as I can tell. And that has been the case everywhere, like real nonviolence. Like the only people who seem to be perpetuating the real violence right now are a few small people who are the entrenched powers that be, who really just want to use violence to oppress everybody else. But that seems to be the only sort of violent spark that's remaining. I think that's a real shift in consciousness, a real shift in energy that is one of the many steps that lead us to a different place. And so, again, step-by-step process. I think a second part of this process is that we all have, in a sense, not all of us, but many of us have golden handcuffs to the systems that be. So let's say you're employed in some job. I used to be employed at a university as a professor. So when I was there and I had tenure, that was big golden handcuffs. It was really hard to give that up. And I see the same for people that I work with who are still at universities, that there's this allure not only to the money and the security, but to the ego gratification of being at a prestigious university and to be put on a pedestal as Professor so-and-so. Like when I decided to leave the university as a tenured faculty, to send an email that says, I effing quit, it was years afterwards of whoa, I'm no longer on a pedestal. What do I do? My ego freaked out for years about that. And it's only been recently, more than 10 years later, where I've felt like I've really recovered from all that ego stuff and really don't care about it anymore, or very little compared to what I did then. So there's this for many of us, when we're part of a system like that, or even just if we receive Social Security or whatever it is, we have this vested interest in wanting the system to continue. But the problem is when the system continues, change can't happen. And if change is sort of the inevitable thing that is being called at this time, you could say by higher consciousness or even by the evolving human consciousness that is just no longer willing to accept the way things have been, because we've seen too much now and we're just ready to move on, that that's that these old systems that hold us with the golden handcuffs are no longer compatible with that. And so what has to happen? Well, unfortunately, most of us aren't willing to give that up. I've experienced it personally in my business, having to really let go of things, let go of big things and big expectations, and really let go of monetary expectations and just all sorts of stuff. I'll go into it in another video if it's relevant. If you want to hear about that story, please let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to share more if it somehow would be inspiring or useful to you. And by the way, right now is a pause to encourage you, before I get to the very end, and remember to please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more. And I love to hear your feedback on the comments. I've been reading them, and it's really fun to see the discussion. I haven't had a chance to respond to them all, but I would like to respond to as many as I can, and I do read them. So anyway, moving forward on that point is that we've got these golden handcuffs. We're in the system. We want the system in some sense to perpetuate. Even if we look at the injustices and how broken the systems are, how screwed up they are, we also are like kind of addicted to them and attached to them at the same time. And so the question is, how do we get rid of that attachment? The way to get rid of that attachment, again, is for those systems to fall apart. And that's what I have received in my channel, and that is what other people have received in their channels. So many people that I follow, that is like, this time is the time of the systems falling apart. Enough of them have to fall apart. This means like financial system, political systems, corporate systems. Probably I've gotten messages that academic systems are going to substantially fall apart before they can reconfigure. And this doesn't mean the end of all this stuff. I'm not talking about like an apocalypse scenario. This is not a video about fear. Fear would be if you have that response, then there may be some clearing work to do for yourself, because this isn't about fear. This is just the message I keep seeing and receiving, that this is the next step of the process. The systems have to fall apart enough so that, maybe not completely, but enough so that we look at them and say, oh, there's no going back. And what that does is that primes us to be ready to create something new. And that's really important, because that's what this time is from all of the prophecies and my own downloads. What this time is about is creating a new level for humanity, an ascension for humanity in a sense. By ascension, that means a raising of consciousness, a functioning at a higher level of consciousness, where we are more unity-oriented, more interested in the well-being of others and of the planet than just our own take, receive, extract kind of stuff, which has been a very three-dimensional level consciousness thing that has been a part of our system for so long. And we have so much extraction going on, even still to this day. But I think that mode is dying out. It just doesn't know that it's dying out yet. Although I also believe that we're seeing some of the last gasp, because I think some of the people do sense that it's dying out. And it's a last gasp to like keep that extractive mode going. Higher consciousness is not about extraction. That doesn't say we don't create things and perhaps earn some form of money in exchange for that. I'm not saying that we just abandon any sense of exchange or entrepreneurialism or innovation. No, I really like entrepreneurialism and innovation, but not in an extractive way, in a way that it builds and creates for all of humanity and that everyone is taken care of. And that's where I believe we're going. But that's a very vague picture. So the final point of this piece, this is really the final step, is creating, envisioning, clarifying what comes next. Now, I know it's hard to do when all of the chaos is going on and you're saying, are we going to be in the WW3 or something soon, and just worrying about like survival, it's hard. And yet when you shift into, I have found, when you shift into that creative energy, it's like, wow, then you get focused on, let me plant the seeds or start tending the little baby shoots of what might come next. And then it just changes your whole energy to a more positive, forward-looking state. And then you can kind of stop paying so much attention to all that ridiculous stuff that's going on out there and think about, what am I creating next? And then when the time comes for where a lot of society gets on board with like, oh yeah, we've no longer got those golden handcuffs because like the systems have fallen apart, and they're finally ready to make change, you will already be at the leading edge of that, because you're like already thinking about what that looks like, what the next step looks like. And on that, I've actually worked through a whole new currency system that I think could really help. And I won't go into it in this video, it would become way too long. But I'll definitely do a video about that soon, especially if you're interested. Just let me know in the comments. But I recently talked to my friend. I visited a friend that I haven't seen for years who is really Marxist. And I'm not specifically a Marxist, although he was, interestingly enough, he was saying that some of the aspects of this currency system remind him of some aspects of Marxism, but I'm too entrepreneurial to be like, as far as I understand Marxism, like a pure Marxist. I love entrepreneurial and innovation and creation. And so but what's interesting again about this money system is that it really looks at how can we give the right rewards and the right incentives for people to actually support one another rather than try to take from one another. So again, I won't go into more detail, but that's an idea of something that I've been thinking about creating. And I've been working on creating some new programs to support people through this transition. And don't worry, I'm not going to pitch any of those on this. I'll talk about them in the future when I'm ready. But creating programs to support people. So I've been really focused on creating. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. That's like the bottom line for me, because I can tell you that's the big antidote to the wild ups and downs and feeling like, oh, heavy and worried and chaotic, is to shift into this understanding that we are all being given the opportunity, or called to, if you want to create, to start thinking about what comes next rather than just being reactive to all of the chaos that is currently going on. So I'll finish the message there. Thanks. I love to hear your comments. What do you think about it? What's your experience? Have you had these ups and downs going on that many of us have experienced? Has it been a wild ride where one day you wake up just like feeling totally like almost unable to get out of bed, or with headaches or ears ringing or things like that? Or have you just been like, oh, it's all normal? I'm really curious to hear where you're at with this in the comments. So please let me know, and I'll see you next time.